system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking
All right, everybody. So I thought I'd come and let's have a little jury deliberation discussion. If you're interested,
All right, everybody.
while
So I
we're
thought I'd come in.
while we're talking, we're while we're waiting on this jury, the Adam Cox case is in closing arguments. The defense just got done. The state's about to do its rebuttal. So head over there and check it out if you're looking to watch something while we await. I think this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy deliberation. So if you're interested, check that case out. Like I said, that one's going to be ending. So it's Wednesday. We might be out of cases by the end of the week, the way it looks. But let's talk about what we heard in this case. Let's talk about the state's closing. Didn't really get a chance to go in depth on it because jury charge came. But look, I think one of the most important pieces of the jury charge is the charge here that states you can be present at the crime scene, but mere presence does not mean you're guilty. So for all of you who are like, hey, she's at the house, she's there, that's not enough. Them simply putting her at the premises at the time that Gary passes is not enough for the state to get a conviction in the case. It requires them, the state, to go the whole way. They've got to walk through that door. They got to go up the steps and through the door and prove that she killed Gary. And they got to prove how she did it. She shot him, put him on the burn pile. It makes zero sense. And I think one of the best visuals I've ever seen, I didn't understand what he was doing at first as he's interspersing his reasonable doubt with the bags of fertilizer. And he's building this 320-pound demonstration to show just how ludicrous it is to believe that she is able to drag Gary's body to the fire. That's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Looks like Sir little Carson right now. I guess he's hearing me speaking, and he's getting fired up again. Hold on one moment. He's right next to me, hanging out. He was taking a little nap, and I think I'm waking him up with my talk here. But that is something that I believe in that jury room. You get into all the other stuff. You get into all the character stuff. You get into all the things that make her look bad. And then you're sitting there, and then you're looking at this, and you're going, okay, make it make sense. Make it make sense. How does this make sense? And good morning, Jody. Good morning. Good to see you. How does this make sense? How does it make sense? And that's what they've got. That is the thing that the defense, not the defense, the state has to overcome in this case. And I don't think they did. The state attorney, while she made some valid points, the problem is she's just asking the jury to go the rest of the way without any evidence to do so. She doesn't address how, again, the glaring issue is how does he get on the burn pile? Now, for those of you who believe he was shot at the burn pile, I no longer believe that any longer after listening to the defense's closing and then going back and doing some further research. I think this crime occurred in the barn. The question always was, what would have happened? What could have happened that would have caused this whole thing to go down between Gary and his son? And I believe something happens in the barn area between Gary and Scott when he returns back. And again, I think Scott comes back. Maybe it was about horses. Maybe it was because, as my theory is maybe it was because, hey, your dad's about to do a burn pile or burn a burn pile. And they get into it. And finally, tempers flare. And I think Melody was putting pressure on Gary. You need to address this situation with the boys. It was like, Scott, where have you been all day? The animals are here. The horses are out. You've been at the lake all day. And he's saying, hey, I'm relaxing. It's the holidays, Dad. And I think they get into it. And then boom, boom. Shots fired. Okay? Now, And then I think you see the call from Scott to Melody, who says, come down here. And there they have this problem. Gary's been shot. Now, the only question I have right now is when that burn pile would have started, because it's only Scott who says there was a burn pile happening on the 3rd. The rest of the witnesses, including the witness that was the ME, the responding ME who lived around the corner, says her and her husband didn't smell a burn pile until the 4th of July, the evening of the 4th of July. Well, I understand that, Holly, but here's the thing with the gunshots. What we don't know, though, and even by the admission of that gentleman, he wasn't completely certain at the time of day when those gunshots occurred. And given the fact that we now know that Gary arrived home at about 9:32, okay, and that he was out to dinner, the question would be then, again, this I guess it was the alarm man. Even by his own admission, he said it was late. So it could have been 11 or 12, which I think makes more sense when you're thinking of the sense that he says he was laying in bed and he says it's kind of a little late. I don't think 9 or 10 necessarily would be considered to be unusually late on 4th of July to hear gunshots or fireworks, especially if you're living in a place that's, a country place like that. 11 or 12 might. But again, remember, this is a guy who said, I'm trying to rely on my memory from 6 years ago. So I think that she, I think that something happens and boom, boom, gunshots happen. And again, the other issue too is we don't know if whatever those alleged gunshots were a mile away, we can't even say they were coming from the Farris residence. Okay, there were a lot of gunshots, fireworks. I mean, on 4th of July around here, it's wild. We're here, all sorts of noise. And I live in a rather, country area in West Virginia, so I can kind of relate to what it's like. And we have the Potomac River, and people are down here. There's fireworks going off. There's guns being fired, all sorts of stuff. So again, there's nothing that specifically says the timing of that shot or when those shots would have occurred. And given the fact that we now have cell phone evidence that suggests now that Gary would have been just arriving home from dinner, he has to, he's getting, it now pushes potentially those gunshots to be later, in my opinion. But again, the issue we come into right now is it's all speculation at this point. There's nothing concrete to say what happened, when it happened, where it happened. And all of that goes in favor of the defense. Because, again, the problem we have is that the prosecution doesn't have one of the key issues at hand, which is where did this happen at? And that's a big problem. Where did it happen? Because I don't believe the blood that's found in the house, based on what came up in the luminol testing, that does not represent the crime scene that would have been present when Melody shoots a 300-pound man who is absolutely hitting the floor, who is absolutely going to be bleeding on the floor, who's absolutely going to be bleeding out. And if she's going to be trying to maneuver him out of the house, it doesn't happen in the house. And you say, well, up at the burn pile. There's no evidence at the burn pile that a shooting happened. There's no blood or DNA or blood in the grass or any signs whatsoever that would have occurred up at the burn pile. Now, is it possible that it could have been up at the barn? Maybe Gary walks up to the barn and she confronts him at the barn. Who knows? But I believe that the answer to this lies with Scott, not Melody. And on top of that, do we really believe that if Melody's planning this out, right, that her plan is going to be to shoot Gary, burn him up on a burn pile at a time when time is an issue. And that she's going to just suddenly say, okay, let's make that the plan. I mean, obviously her plan was very clearly at one point, or had been, to poison him allegedly. At least that's what the family thought. So now we're going to say, okay, she moves from poisoning him. Wouldn't it have been, I mean, to me, right? Wouldn't it have made more sense? Why would you shoot him when you would be, if you're in a process of poisoning the man, you poison him to death, and then you take him out and you put him in the burn pile. And then guess what? There's no bullet to be found. There's no issue of any of the problems that come up when you shoot him. There's no blood in the house. It makes very little sense that she's going to decide, I'm going to shoot him. Clearly, that's not her mode, and hadn't been her mode of thought to say, that's how I'm going to kill my husband. Because again, and that comes out in the video that we know, the cell phone video that we saw, where Gary himself is saying he thinks he's being poisoned by her. So she's poisoning him. If that's her method of means, then how do we end up with a shooting? I believe we end up at a shooting only because there's one guy with a gun on the property. There's one guy who's good with a gun. There's one guy who knows about burn piles, and that's Scott. There's one guy who talks about a gun before anyone else knows about a gun. That's Scott. And those are damning problems for the state's case. When you have a jury back there, you go, okay, how does she get him to the burn pile? How does she, okay, so you have that problem. Then you go, well, wait a minute. Who's talking about a gun first? Scott. Who's got 38 caliber bullets in his house? Scott. Who's got a pristine bathroom in an otherwise dirty and we'll just say bachelor-like pad? Scott. What's going on here? What's going on here with that picture? And there's no way in the world, if you're sitting in that jury room, that you're going to be able to say, okay, yeah, this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because when you look at the jury instructions, if they follow the jury instructions, they are going to be left with this picture in front of them that's going to be incomplete on the murder. So what I think is going to happen here, I think there's going to be a huge dispute in that jury room, and I think they're going to convict her of concealing and making a false statement. And I think that's what she will get convicted of, and I think she will be acquitted of the first three. And there's someone that came in my chat earlier who suggested that, and I think that is where they're going to land. This will be in my opinion, a compromise verdict, because I don't believe you're going to get 12 people who believe that the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that she killed him. You're going to get 12 people that are going to believe she should be punished in some way. And the concealing does that. And that is a way for this jury to say, you know what? We didn't let her off completely. She doesn't get to walk free out of that courtroom. And I don't know what concealing is going to garner her. I haven't looked it up. But I don't believe you're going to get 12 jurors. And I think the jury will feel good about that, because they're going to say, look, no question, if she did this, she concealed a crime. If she knew Scott did it, she concealed a crime. Concealing is where this jury can live at. And again, having been on a jury before, with this set of evidence, I think that jury can walk out and say, I would feel really good about that verdict. Can they walk out beyond a reasonable doubt and feel good for certain? I don't believe so. And I think all of you who are so certain that she's guilty, I don't think you can either. I think you're making a jump, but I think if you were to really look at this and say beyond a reasonable doubt, and you're looking at it not from, do you believe she did this or was part of doing this, but looking at it and saying, doing the right analysis. The right analysis is not, do you believe she did it? It's, do you believe the state's evidence meets the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning that there's no doubt in a reasonable person's mind as to whether or not she did it or Scott could have done it. And there's no way that the evidence presented in this trial meets that test. Now, does concealing meet that test? Yes, because if she in any way agreed to help Scott to conceal this, then she's guilty. And I think that is something that you could say, okay, that's where a jury would compromise in this. And we will find, that's what I think is going to happen. But we'll see. But I think it's going to be an extended deliberation. So my prediction on deliberations, again, this was a 15-day trial. Rule of thumb is for every 8 hours of testimony, you've got about 1 hour of deliberation. So for a case like this, you're talking about 13 to 14 hours of deliberation. You've got, again, the judge has already said if you want to go to 2, 3, 4 in the morning, they're allowed to do that. I don't think they're going to. Now, what I think will happen is I think they might go a little bit into the evening time, to push a little bit. I think they'll break. Now, maybe they go back there and they come to this compromise quickly. But I don't think so. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be a tough deliberation. But I think at the end, that's the way they're going to come back and say, you know what, we can all live with that. And they will at that point, decide concealing, false statement, all of that. And she's not walking, okay? She's not going to walk because they've got her on a false statement, in my opinion. They've got her on concealing because I don't think there is anybody in that courtroom who listens to this case and thinks she was just completely innocent living on that property and didn't know. So 4, 5, they got her. 1, 2, 3, I don't think so. I think they're going to find her not guilty of 1, 2, 3. I think they're going to find her guilty of 4 and 5. And then whatever the penalty is for those, I don't know. I need to look it up and see. All right, let's check the chat out a little bit here. So Holly says the 2 a.m. phone call is what convinced me all of her jail talk and code with Rusty too. All right, let's see here. And Patricia Bird says there's definitely more doubt due to lack of evidence than there was in the Casey Anthony case. There's a lot of doubt in this case. I mean, there's a difference, and you got to separate and parse out the difference between doubt. Again, remember, do we think she did it? I think she was a part of it. Now, how she did it, where she did it, what she was a part of, who helped her, she was a part of this. I absolutely believe it. But that's far different than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And innocent people don't talk in code. Well, absolutely. That's why I said I believe something happened on that farm on that night. Whether it was she and Gary get in a fight and she shoots him and she calls Scott back for the horses and then has her help him with dispose of the body or whatever and says, Scott, you've got to help me. Or Scott comes back because she calls him back to do the horses and get the animals out, and there's an argument, and maybe she's convinced Gary, we need to talk to Scott because he's up at, they're pissed off that he's up there up at the lake house and not taking care of things. So Gary and her decide to confront him and things go, or Gary goes down and confronts him and things go off the rails. Or whatever, but she is in some way, something happened that night that she was a part of, that she was aware of. I'm inclined to believe that it happened sometime around midnight, between probably, 11 and midnight, or 11:30 and midnight. And then I believe that was what sets off all these calls to Rusty. And I believe Rusty is aware of whatever happened. And I believe Rusty, in fear of being charged, says this stupid statement where he says it was having all this conversation about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And then at the end, she says, oh, he's on the burn pile, which makes zero sense for her to offer that up in any way, shape, or form. But he gives that to the police because he's thinking to himself, I got to give them something or else I'm going to end up going to jail. And then we end up here. Because once the police have that, they have enough probable cause to get her indicted. They indict her, and then they take all the rest of the evidence and they try to just fit it around her. And the problem we have right now is, well, maybe it works. Maybe it works. Maybe they go back there and they convict her on all 5. But I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be 4 and 5. I think she's going to walk on 1, 2, 3. Now, whether she walks out of the courtroom after being convicted of 4 and 5, I don't know. That judge seems like a pretty decent guy. I think he's going to sentence her fairly. But, I would imagine she's going to go do some time. And then the state of Georgia is going to have some egg on their hands, on their face, when they are sitting there with an incomplete verdict, basically, for this, indicating that the jury would have found that they suspect that she has someone else. And maybe that's what they're hoping to do, because maybe once they get the conviction, they go to her and say, Melody, is there something you want to tell us? And then she might flip on Scott, and we might actually find out what happened. But we'll find out. We'll find out, hopefully, soon. But I think it'll be tomorrow at the earliest. Although with tomorrow being Halloween, I think the judge has made it pretty clear that he doesn't want to be here late tomorrow. And if these jurors have kids, they're probably not going to want to be here late tomorrow. So I would imagine if they're deliberating close to 5 o'clock tomorrow, they may request to go home. And I think we definitely have a verdict on Friday. Now, if it's going to be guilty, if this jury comes back like the Murdaugh case, and remember, a lot of the prognosticators in Murdaugh world, I wasn't around doing this on YouTube, but I watched it. And I remember I thought that was going to be an extended deliberation. I think everybody did. It was like, almost 4 or 5 weeks of trial. And they convicted him in 4 hours. And that jury ran right to the guillotine, so to speak, chopped his head off at the town square, and really was very convinced by what the state presented. And perhaps that happens here. Perhaps there isn't an extended deliberation, but I think there will be. I don't think this case is as easy as that one, although it could be. Like I said, if the jury wants to make the leap and say, hey, you look at the phone records and the evidence is there for a jury to decide we want to convict her, in terms of there's a story to be told in that jury deliberation room where everybody can get behind, can be a short deliberations, lights out, we go home. And it's just like some of you have been talking about. We've got the repairman who puts the shooting between 9 and 10. He gets home. It's between 9 and 10. Boom, boom. She shoots him. And even if she got Scott's help, they can convict her on everything under that theory. She might have called Scott. They say, well, maybe she called him for help. Maybe she did. We don't know. But he ends up on the burn pile on the 5th. Lights out. It's finished. It's done. So, well, Teresa Board, my theory on that is the bullet and the gun. Okay, if obviously there's two people in my opinion, when I'm looking at this case, that would have done this. If it's either her or Scott. So if she didn't shoot Gary, Scott shot Gary. The issue of the bullet is handled if you believe that she didn't do the shooting, but that she would have been part of a cover-up with Scott after Scott does this. And that would mean that then it would work like this again. And if you listen to Amanda Farris's testimony, the implication is that Scott starts freaking out and panicking when he sees his mom and Amanda down by the fire pit. And then Scott kind of just, well, the prosecutor says he takes control, but he just kind of goes, okay, holy shit, what the hell? They're about to find this thing out. And he calls 911. He tells everybody, or Chris and I think Amanda, he tells both of them, I'm going in the house. I need to see if the gun's still there. And it's when he goes in there to look for the gun in the basement, my belief is, again, he part of why the defense played the videos they did to show he was shooting guns on the property. He takes that bullet and drops it in the basement. And then he goes and tells law enforcement as soon as they get on there, hey, there's a bullet, or there's a gun missing. I don't know what happened here. My dad's in the burn pile. There's a gun missing. There's some weird stuff going on. And the tie-in here is that when they hear about a gun missing, and then he knows they're going to go in and search the house, and then they find the bullet, the implication would be, and again, if he shot his dad and put him in the burn pile, he's going to know that Gary died of a gunshot wound. And then that's why the whole idea here is Scott talking about a gun being missing. This is why Scott is a suspect. This is why he was a suspect. And for all of you who are wondering, yes, he was a suspect. Go back and listen to the interrogation video or the police statement she gave, and they're telling him, you can go tell Chris, you can go tell your daughter, but don't say nothing to Scott, because we need to tell Scott certain things, because he's someone we need to question. He's a person of interest in this case. Now, ultimately, they didn't have enough to charge Scott with anything, because they go up and they get the Nest Cam from his friend. His friend says, yeah, they confirms the horses. And they really couldn't put Scott near the burn pile or doing anything. And again, she doesn't get charged if Rusty Barton doesn't say this stupid statement where he says, she told me she put him on the burn pile. That is the only reason why she's charged and where she's at right now. Without that, she's not charged, or she wouldn't have been charged when she was. Maybe she'd be charged. Maybe they'd all be charged. But that was where the rush to judgment, took off. They were looking and looking and looking, and when they got that, they decided, we're going to arrest her. Now, I think maybe they thought they arrest her, and if she was working with somebody, and if she really hates her kids that much, she'll turn on her kids and say, let me tell you the story, and maybe try to work a deal out with them that lets her walk and put Scott in a bad light. And one would think that that's probably what she would do, but, not always, not necessarily. She might actually love her kids, or at this point, she might say, you know what, the move is I need to get acquitted completely, because I think what she's going to want to do, in my opinion, and this is for all of you who say, well, why didn't she cut a deal against Scott? Because she's going for full exoneration. And why is that? Because she would get the opportunity to then get the money, or some of the money at least, some of the life insurance money. It looks like something's going on behind us. The clock's on now. That she would get some of that money. She would be able to claim. I don't know that she would get all of the accident, because this isn't an accident, but she would get some of the life insurance money. She would get to lay claim to the retirement funds. So that's why she's not cutting deals, because if she cuts a deal and says, yeah, I helped Scott do this, she's not entitled to any of that. So that's the answer. Money is still a driving factor here, because now they all got to survive after the fact. And now she's aware of what's on the line. And that's another thing too. The state did not present one piece of evidence to suggest that she had any idea of the money that she would receive. In fact, the state's evidence that they presented in this case was to the contrary. It was that she didn't know what money she had. It was that she was concerned about what they had. It was that she was going around asking. Why would you be going around asking about the money right after this happens? And that's what the state, that's suspicious, because she had to know he was going. No. Or, how distasteful. Well, if she knew what she had coming her way, she wouldn't have been asking those questions. So you don't do a whole murder, for a basis of money if you don't know what money you're going to get. Well, I believe the money right now would be held, the life insurance company on the life insurance policies, until this case is worked out. I would imagine the life insurance probably hasn't been paid out yet, because at this point, she was the beneficiary. So her trial, they can't just go pay it to somebody else until this gets worked out. So right now, they're holding that money until this trial is worked out. So the reason why she would never plead out is because if she pleads out, she loses all that money. Or at least it's not going to be the amount of money she would have got if this was been an accident where he falls in the burn pile. But she's going to get some money. But all of that money is going to be held. And then I don't know if the retirement money and all of that might have been worked out into his estate. I'm sure that she might have gotten some of that. I don't know. But I'm sure the state's being contested, because they're not just going to let her walk off with that if she's accused of his death. So I'd imagine all of that is being held up and being weighted. And again, that's a motivation for why Scott, and that's what the defense was saying. They want her to, these people came into court because they want her to get convicted. Because when she gets convicted, Scott, Chris, Amanda, the other daughter, can't remember, her name escapes me, they're running off with all the money. So, I mean, that wasn't really talked about, but maybe it wasn't allowed to be. So, you know, that's what I mean. This begins and ends with money. Wherever you place the blame. If Scott did it, he did it for money, but he lost the farm in the end. But my thing is she knew she needed Gary due to she knew she needed Gary for the cash flow. I mean, her life changes forever. And I know the prosecution made a big deal, said, well, she would get like $4.4 million. Again, I say to you, that sounds like a lot. But Gary's budget for the lifestyle she was accustomed to was about $600,000. This lady does not have any skills whatsoever that would allow her to live and generate income to that degree. All right, so what's going on here? We got stuff happening here. I don't know what it is. I wonder if we have a verdict. Let's go. All right, let's go into the courtroom, guys. I'm going to swap over to my courtroom. I would imagine maybe we have a jury question. I can't imagine a verdict is about to happen. I would imagine the courtroom would be much more filled up. Let me take a little peek over here onto different potential news organizations here that might have shed some light on what we're seeing here. And over on the Adam Cox case, it looks like they're, or Adam Coy case, they are doing the state's closing there. So it looks like we're going to be on a double jury verdict watch. Hook my phone in. Looks like my phone died.
Let me make sure that I think I know what y'all are asking I think you're wanting, which is
Judge has not turned the sound on yet. Paper. So let's see what's going on here.
Okay. Now, some of those were not introduced as evidence and are just demonstrative of the testimony.
As soon as she turns the sound on, I guess we'll know what's going on. If it's a verdict or a question, I could not imagine it's a verdict. But
each of those out to you, Ms. Franklin.
Crazier things have happened.
So that we can refer to
everybody seems a little bit too relaxed, I think, in a sense.
Aerial shots of the photos, so that's all the things that have been on the board all trial, right? And y'all aren't asking.
She looks a little too relaxed. If this was a verdict, I would think she would be completely stressed.
I also understand that y'all want to break at 5 o'clock. I'm not going to bring y'all back in here in 10 minutes to then dismiss you for the day. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give y'all the instructions for when y'all want to be dismissed, and y'all can be.
So right now there is no sound on the feed. So
leave. Okay. So if y'all
court
want
must
to go
not be in session
and
yet. So I don't know what's
that's
happening.
Fine. If y'all want to go back and talk for another 10, 15 minutes and then leave, that's fine as well. Everything that I have told, we are at the most critical stage of this trial in which y'all have the case. Everything that I've told you.
Alan Faria, the judge is not speaking right now. He is talking
about the case. Y'all will get your phones back We're not going to keep them from you for the rest of the week, so y'all can have them. But when you come back tomorrow, please make sure you give them to the bailiffs and turn them off. We will not do anything in the morning to ramp back up. Do y'all want to start at 9 o'clock? Do you want to start at 8:30? Y'all want to start at 10? 9 o'clock. We're still going to, until, I guess we need to keep, we can get rid of 4 of the cones, I guess. But we will still have parking assigned for y'all, which if y'all saw how bad it was Monday was a good thing. So we'll still have parking for y'all. Someone asked the bailiffs about lunch. We don't typically do lunches while y'all are deliberating. I usually do it the first day, like today. I expect that by lunchtime tomorrow, y'all probably want to go get some fresh air and go away. Y'all are welcome to eat lunch together. Y'all are welcome to go about your own business. But what's the rule while y'all are outside of the jury room eating lunch? There you go. Fantastic. All right. We will take your devices up in the morning. The bailiffs will be waiting for you just like they have been throughout the trial. Someone will be at the end of the hallway. Again, y'all all show up. When you're all here, then y'all can begin deliberating. All right? So any questions about any of that or what your responsibilities are going forward?
Just a report notice on, I guess, the parking, not parking garage side, but the ground level side. There was media out there filming, so.
All right. So, well, they're going to be, y'all going to be coming and going from the building since y'all have parking here. So y'all be going out the back door, so y'all shouldn't have anything to worry about. But they may be talking to some folks outside. I've asked them as best they can to do that in front of the building instead of the back of the building. All right, with that, we're going to give those exhibits. Yes, if you go ahead, Ms. Frankish.
I'm sending back S. Farris 11, which is the aerial of the house with the red pin in it. Case 60 with the black push pin in it. And then case 59, which is the Lakeview aerial. States demonstrative 1, the family tree, and states demonstrative 2, Rusty Barton interview dates.
No objection.
All right. We'll send those out to you. And again, y'all can. We sent the calendar out with the first one because there's a smaller version of the calendar. Oh yeah, do y'all want the big one? We'll give you the big one too. All right. All right. With that, y'all can be excused back to the jury room. Again, when y'all decide to break for the afternoon, then y'all can just leave. All right? Thank you. All right, Shane, here you go. So, Mr. Roberts, now you decide to join us. Right.
All right, all. Sorry about that, Al, and those who were letting me know that the sound was on. I had turned it off because whenever I'm running 2 trials, I will turn the sound off when I'm speaking, so I don't hear the other trials and things going on. And I didn't realize I had not routed everything back to my headphones. So once I turned my phone on and got over and was looking to see what was going on, and then I saw in there, realized I had not routed my sound. So very much apologize for that. So peers, we're going to be breaking for the day. We're just going to call it. I mean, they're not coming with a verdict in the next 8 minutes. So it appears the jury will be breaking for the day at 5 o'clock. I guess they want to review some evidence. So not surprised. It's been a long day. This is a great indicator that this jury is definitely a divided house back there. There's no way that they believe this is going to be a quick verdict. I think if they would have got back there and thought, hey, we're 11-1 or we're 10-2, we're close, they'd have stayed and maybe discussed it to 7 or 8 o'clock and been done with the case. But as I said, this is going to be we've got probably 2 hours of deliberations of what I'm saying, of what rule of thumb would say about 13 to 14 hours of deliberation is going to be standard. So we're probably talking about another 11 hours of deliberation that could be expected. So under that idea, if they get here at 9 o'clock tomorrow, I think they're going to break again at 5. It's Halloween. I don't think anybody's going to expect them to stay past 5 o'clock tomorrow. So unless they're able to work towards a verdict tomorrow afternoon, and this judge doesn't seem one to put pressure on them, I think we're going to get questions. We're going to get playbacks. We're going to get all sorts of stuff like that going on tomorrow. And I think Friday is when this verdict's happening. I don't see this jury or the judge taking this deliberation into the weekend or past the weekend. This jury, I think, is going to, again, I think part of the equation here was the idea that this would give the jury a less stressful deliberation period. So we all know when deliberations begin on Fridays, like what happened with Sarah Boone, or Thursdays or Fridays, that Friday deadline is something that in the jurors' minds, they're like, I want to get the heck out of here. I don't want to be here. I don't want this running in the next week. I want to go back to work, get my life back. So there's a huge incentive for the jury to either declare themselves deadlocked or come back with a verdict on a Friday. And I think we're going to see that play out here in this case, given that it's Wednesday and they're going to have a full day tomorrow. And then Friday is when we're going to start to see, if they're deadlocked, we'll see the Allen charge probably delivered, and then they would be declaring a mistrial, or we'll get a verdict. And again, I believe where they're going to go with this, I think this is ripe. I don't think you're going to see a mistrial, because this is the type of thing I think you're going to see either a partial verdict delivered, and maybe you get a mistrial on the other counts, or you see a compromise where she's convicted of 4 and 5, and 1, 2, 3 they acquit her on. So Simon Bagel says he's been on 3 juries. One got very heated and ended in a hung jury. Well, the one I was on was it got a little heated. And it ended in a compromise verdict. Jacqueline Finn Morgan says, I can hear him fine. I'm glad. Thank you. I'm glad it sounds good. So looks like, as you can see behind me, the live feed is over for the day. So let's go with something else in the background, right? We don't want to end up catching some sort of a. Let's flip it back over here. All right, so there we go. That'll be a good background for us right now. Actually, you know what? Better yet, let's turn that off. There we go. That's even better. All right, so jury is deliberating, but they're not going to be deliberating for long, so we're going to take that off because jury's done for the day. So that's where we stand, guys. But again, I believe, like I said, this case is a very, very, very difficult one, in my opinion, because it's a case that, from a legal standpoint, the verdict should be not guilty, at least on the first 3 charges. However, it's very difficult when you believe someone more likely than not did something to just say, well, I'm going to find this person not guilty and let them walk free and let them get away with it. And there's plenty here for a jury to lay their hat on and say, all right, you know what? I'm all right with it. And I think the way they've charged this, I think 4 or 5, I think the only question is, will there be a mistrial or a hung jury on 1, 2, and 3? And I could even see getting acquitted of, say, malice murder. I think they're going to acquit her of malice, because I think that's the toughest one. Especially, that was part of why they had just. Hold on, buddy. I'm live. Yeah, I'm still live, buddy. I think they're going to acquit her of malice murder, And then I think that's going to be an acquittal, because that's part of why they brought the medical examiner in. Because remember, if you go back to the opening statements, they're getting to malice murder was the gunshots. She shot him twice. By showing that the gunshots weren't deadly, okay, and being unable to say how all of that occurred, now you get to saying, okay, felony murder would be a felonious assault is committed that results in someone dying. So now you're going to get to a hung jury on the felonious assault and the felony murder. And then you're going to get an acquittal on malice. So this could be one of those situations where you see a verdict come back and you're like, oh my God, okay, not guilty. She's smiling. Hung jury on the other two. And then she gets back to 4 and 5 and she's convicted of both of them. So it could be a complete mixed bag. And then it could also be, of course, the jury says, we can't say she killed him, but what we can definitely say is she had to, at some level, have participated in a cover-up, and at some level, she was lying. And if she did that, she's lying to the police then. So she made a false statement. And then you get 4 and 5 out. So let's take a look at one final thing here before we conclude for the day. And then we're going to go back. I'll be over in the Adam Coy case, because that's going to go to the jury, and it's about to go to a jury charge. And I don't know if that judge is going to dismiss them for the day, or if they're going to let them start deliberating. We'll see what happens on that. But I could see that one having a verdict today. I think there'll be a verdict in that one. That one's pretty cut and dry in terms of the way the jury's going to see this. They've viewed the video. They've listened to the use of force experts. I mean, it's not really a whodunit. I think it's going to be, they're going to get back there and it's going to go one way or the other, depending on what the makeup of the jury is. But let's see here. Concealing Georgia. Concealing death. Okay, so again, I don't know if anybody on the jury is going to go do any research, but let me show you what I found here. So hopefully you guys, we're shorting the chat box a little bit right here behind me while we look here. But if you see behind me on the screen here, I've got the Georgia statute up. It says a person who, by concealing the death of another person, hinders the discovery of whether or not such a person was unlawfully killed, is guilty of a felony, and upon conviction shall be punished for imprisonment of not less than 1 nor more than 10 years, a fine of not less than 1,000 nor more than 5,000. So she's looking at, if she were to be convicted of that charge, she's looking at up to 10 years. And I would imagine that judge would give her 10 years in a case like this. So she would be getting up to 10 years, at least 1 year. So I would imagine he's revoking bond and throwing her in jail right away. And then you've got the false statement. Let's see what false statement would be. False statements, Georgia. Hold on here. False statements. False statements in Georgia. And that's between 1 and 5 years, in a fine of up to $1,000. So if she were to be convicted of both of those charges 4 and 5, she's looking at up to 15 years in prison if a judge were to run those consecutive, and I would imagine the judge would. Now, she's a first offender. All that's got to get taken into account. I don't know if that's an indeterminate term or if the judge can sentence her on the top end or low end. Let's see what it says in there. 1 to 5, is that going to? So it might be an indeterminate term. And what an indeterminate term means is she would be sentenced to 1 to 5. So after 1 year, she would be eligible to see the parole board. They would decide then how long she would serve. And then, of course, you're going to have good behavior that's going to kill some of it. So she'd probably be serving maybe 3 years, 2 to 3 years tops on that charge, and maybe 5 to 6 years on the other. But far less than the rest of her life in prison, but not ideal at all if she were to be found guilty of those charges. I don't think she wants to go to prison at all. So I think that would be, but again, I could see the jury making that concession there. Kenneth Reed says the jury will see you in hell guilty. Well, listen. They may find her guilty. We'll see. If there's people with your mindset, Kenneth, then she'll be found guilty. I think there is a lot of unknowns, but listen, pray for the hustle, pray then hustle. I believe that it's going to be a situation though. I don't believe a juror could be sitting in that jury room and thinking to themselves, she's not involved at some level. The 4 and the 5 charges, 4 and 5 are the way out of this. Now, that's also a path for her to possibly work some sort of a plea bargain out, at that point, if she were to find herself convicted of those. And then the state would be being told by the jury that they believe that there might be some merit to filing a case against someone else if they don't believe she fully did this. So, it'll be interesting. But this will be a very interesting verdict. So we'll be back tomorrow, full coverage tomorrow on this. I'm going to be editing together. I think we're gonna do some analysis here, possibly in a little while, where we'll rewatch the defense and the state's closings in their entirety. But instead of we listened earlier this afternoon, but we'll stop and break it down. So we might do something like that this evening. We'll see. I've got to pull them down and edit them and get them ready to go for something like that. But look, there's a lot of doubt in my mind. I do not believe that the state met their burden in this case, at least not on counts 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, and really, not even on 4 and 5 necessarily. What I'm unclear on is what was the specific statement they're claiming was false. I guess that's why we heard all those police statements. So I'm assuming it's the statement where she said she was innocent, I guess. Again, another reason why you don't talk to the police, especially if you're in a state where they have false statement laws and charges like that, because you find yourself, charged with something like that's punishable up to 5 years in prison. So we'll see what happens. But I think there's going to be some sort of a guilty verdict in this case. The only question is, what is that jury returning guilty on? And then it's also possible they come back with not guilty down the line if they just flat out don't think the state met its burden. And factually, I don't believe they did. But I could see this jury. I just really find it hard to believe in my mind that a jury would be willing to just walk out of that jury room and say she gets to walk completely free. I don't think they're gonna like that. But I think they could live with the concealing of death and the making a false statement, and she'll have to learn to live with that as well. But anyways, guys, that's where we're going to end it. And we'll go from there. I'll see you guys in the morning. We'll pull this thing back up in the morning. We'll be monitoring the jury deliberations all day. I'll be in and out talking to you. We'll chat. Maybe we'll preserve the rerunning the closings, and maybe I'll pick some testimonies out that we could run through while we're waiting and listen to, and analyze. The cell phone data analyst is extremely important in this case, I think, because she brought a whole new element to this case as far as understanding when Gary died, when he last was heard from, when the last time he left the property and returned to the property was. So really tighten up the timeline. And then you've got, others. One of the ones I want to look at is I want to find the expert. Maybe I think it might have been the anthropologist who discussed when that fire would have been, how long that fire would have burned, because that's significant, because that was brought up in the defense's closing, and that was at that fire only would have burned for maybe 24 hours. In other words, it would have started 24 hours before they found the body, which is damning for the state's case. And that would mean there's a potential in this case that there was no fire at all on the 3rd, that Gary was shot, killed, left in the barn, maybe left somewhere, and then a decision was made to dispose of the body and burn him up on 4th of July, maybe wait to do that while 4th of July is going and fireworks are going, and nobody would think it would be strange that a burn pile would be going. Perhaps that's why they were having him walk, why Melody's walking his phone all over the property, to make it look like, hey, Gary's walking all over the property. He's still alive. I mean, in her mind, in their mind, they're not going to, they're thinking to themselves, how would they know when he passed? Put him in a burn pile, burn him up. Now, on the other hand, one thought is this. I think Melody's text to Rusty, which was he wasn't supposed to be so burned up, well, that could be an indicator as well that they wanted it to appear that Gary, was burned up enough that they wouldn't be able to tell he was shot, but that it would appear he had one of his episodes, passed out, fell in the burn pile, and had an accident, and that they were setting this up, her and Scott. And again, maybe they had some sort of an agreement that they would split this life insurance money. Who knows? Remember, the only indication that there was ever a burn pile on the night of the 3rd into the morning of the 4th is coming from Rusty saying that she told him he was on the burn pile. We know there was a flurry of phone activity, which tells me whatever happened to Gary happened then. We know Gary didn't go to sleep. What happens after that, I don't know. And let's check the poll here. We've got 23%, 77% guilty, 23% not guilty. Strong indication. Jamie Barber says, I can hear the judge. You hear the judge? What do you mean? There is no judge to hear. Unless you're hearing a judge in another case, the other case that I have, somehow that's coming through. That shouldn't be there. Let me double check my sound. Let's see. I'm going to do a sound check here. That's odd. If you're telling me you can hear a judge, you shouldn't, because it's not even connected to the...
Must speak not guilty. Must speak not guilty. Must speak not guilty. Must speak not guilty. Must speak not.
Yeah, so I guess it's, of course, I'm playing that and it's giving the feedback. So now that was the judge in the other case that was on. I just had flipped into that live, but okay. I don't know what's being heard there, but it might be, maybe you're a little behind there, Jamma. I don't know. You might be a little behind on the broadcast there, which might be why you're seeing the confusion that happened earlier. But anyways, I think, like I said, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to determine what happened in this case. But I think the truth of this matter lies with both Melody and Scott. I just don't think she's able to do all of this on her own. I think that, I don't know. And then again, maybe Melody did it all on her own. Maybe she lured him down to the burn pile in the morning, but again, the evidence is he didn't go to sleep on the 3rd because there's no evidence he used the CPAP. So that would indicate that something happened the evening of the 3rd into the morning of the 4th. But I guess we'll find out now. as her daughter said. It's up to the jury now to determine whether she is been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So, with that said, guys, we're going to go ahead and end this broadcast. I appreciate everybody watching. Check back in tomorrow. We'll be covering it, and then hopefully we can come together for the verdict. And of course, we'll be continuing to talk, continuing to analyze, continuing to watch as this process unfolds over the next day or two, and we get to a conclusion on the Melody Walker Farris case. In the meantime, guys, go over and check out the other case that we're covering, the Adam Coy case. Very interesting case. It's about to go to the jury. Check out that one. And until we talk again, guys, let justice prevail, and I'll talk to you soon.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the